The Challenge of Centauri Prime. The crystalline towers of the Centaurian Science Academy pierced the violet sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the base of the massive structure, her breath creating small clouds in the crisp alien air. After 6 months of interstellar travel, she had finally arrived at humanity's greatest scientific opportunity and its greatest challenge. The Centaurians were the most advanced civilization humanity had encountered since achieving faster-than-light travel. Their mastery of quantum mechanics and energy generation had solved problems Earth scientists had struggled with for centuries. But now, they faced their own crisis, one they claimed was unsolvable. "Dr. Chen, welcome to Centauri Prime." The voice came from behind her, its tonal frequencies carefully modulated to match human hearing. Sarah turned to face Chief Scientist Kvax, whose crystalline form shifted colors in the fading light. "Though I must admit, I fail to understand why the Earth Coalition insisted on sending you." Sarah maintained her diplomatic smile, though her jaw tightened slightly. "The Coalition believes fresh perspectives can be valuable, especially when dealing with seemingly impossible problems." Kvax's form flickered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. "Ah yes, the famous human optimism. Tell me, Dr. Chen, do you truly believe you can succeed where generations of Centaurian scientists have failed?" They began walking toward the Academy's main entrance, passing through fields of geometric gardens where crystalline plants grew in perfect mathematical patterns. The sight still amazed Sarah, even after reviewing countless holographic recordings during her journey. "I believe in understanding problems before declaring them impossible," Sarah replied carefully. "Your energy spires have transformed your civilization, but you can't see inside them, can't access their core systems. That seems like a puzzle worth solving." The energy spires were the crown jewels of Centaurian civilization, massive crystalline structures that generated virtually unlimited power through processes that defied conventional physics. They had appeared mysteriously millennia ago, and while the Centaurians had learned to tap into their power, they had never managed to truly understand them. Kvax led her into the Academy's main atrium, where dozens of Centaurians worked at quantum interface terminals, their crystalline bodies refracting light in complex patterns. "The spires are unseeable," he stated matter-of-factly. "It is not merely a limitation of technology or methodology. The laws of physics themselves prevent direct observation of their internal structure." Sarah had heard this argument before, in the briefing packets and preliminary meetings. The Centaurians had elevated their inability to solve this problem into an immutable law of nature. It was exactly the kind of thinking that humanity had learned to challenge. "With respect, Chief Scientist, humans have a long history of achieving the impossible. We developed flight by studying birds, split the atom by understanding its structure, and achieved faster-than-light travel by questioning our most basic assumptions about space-time." They stopped at a viewing window that looked out over the largest energy spire, its surface somehow both transparent and opaque, like a diamond made of smoke. Kvax's color shifted to a deeper blue, indicating what Sarah had come to recognize as skepticism. "Dr. Chen, our civilization has spent millennia studying the spires. We have developed technologies your species can barely comprehend. Yet you believe that in the span of your brief assignment here, you will somehow succeed where we have failed." Sarah turned to face the Chief Scientist directly. "I believe that sometimes we need to step back from what we think we know to see what's actually there. The spires are technology, even if they're far beyond our current understanding. Technology can be studied, understood, and ultimately mastered." "An admirable sentiment," Kvax replied, his tone carrying a hint of condescension. "You will have access to our research facilities and historical records. I look forward to seeing how long your human optimism survives contact with reality." As Kvax departed, Sarah remained at the window, studying the mysterious spire. In the fading light, she could see faint patterns rippling across its surface, patterns that seemed to shift and change whenever she tried to focus on them directly. She pulled out her tablet and began making notes. The Centaurians had documented everything they could observe about the spires, but Sarah noticed they always approached the problem from the same angle, trying to force their way through the barrier that prevented direct observation. But what if the barrier itself was the key? What if the very thing that made the spires unseeable could tell them something about their nature? Sarah smiled as she continued writing. Kfax and his colleagues had spent so long convinced of what was impossible, they'd stopped looking for new possibilities. But humans? Humans thrived on impossible challenges. She had 6 months to prove them wrong. It was time to get to work. The next morning, Sarah began her investigation with what the Centaurians probably considered the most primitive approach possible: simple observation. While they had sophisticated quantum scanning equipment and multidimensional sensors, Sarah wanted to start with her own eyes. She set up a basic recording station at various distances from the nearest spire, carefully documenting how the structure's appearance changed throughout the day. The Centaurian scientists passing by regarded her with what seemed to be a mixture of pity and amusement, their crystalline forms flickering with colorful displays of skepticism. But Sarah had learned long ago to trust her instincts. As she watched the spire through the changing light of the 3 suns, she began to notice something the Centaurians' complex instruments might have missed: a pattern in how the structure seemed to bend light around itself, almost like a natural prism, but with subtle irregularities that suggested purpose rather than random refraction. "Fascinating approach, Dr. Chen," came a voice from behind her, "though perhaps a bit primitive." Sarah turned to find Kfax's assistant, Lurix, whose younger age was evident in the slightly less complex patterns of their crystalline form. "Sometimes the simplest observations lead to the most interesting questions," Sarah replied, gesturing to her notes. "Have you ever noticed how the spire's light-bending properties don't follow standard refraction patterns?" Ulrich moved closer, their form shifting to indicate interest. "All crystalline structures bend light, Dr. Chen. It's a basic property of our world." "Yes, but look here." Sarah pointed to a particular section of her recordings. "The deviation isn't random. There's a regularity to it, almost like—" She paused, an idea beginning to form. The Centaurians had always approached the spires as if they were trying to hide something. But what if they weren't hiding? What if they were showing something, just not in a way anyone had thought to look for? "Like what?" Ulrich asked, their curiosity evident in the rapid color changes rippling through their form. Sarah smiled. "Like they're trying to tell us something. We just haven't learned how to read it yet." The hidden pattern. Dr. Sarah Chen's laboratory in the Centaurian Science Academy had become a chaos of holographic displays, data streams, and scattered equipment. 3 weeks had passed since her initial observation of the spire's unusual light-bending properties, and she was beginning to see something that the Centaurians had missed for millennia: a message hidden in plain sight. "Your theory is unconventional, Dr. Chen," Lurix said, their crystalline form shifting through shades of skeptical blue as they reviewed her findings. The young Centaurian had become an unofficial liaison between Sarah and the Academy, drawn in by her unorthodox methods. "That's a diplomatic way of saying crazy," Sarah replied with a smile, manipulating a 3D model of the light patterns she documented. "But look at this sequence. It's not random noise. There's a clear mathematical progression." The holographic display showed waves of light bending around the spire's surface, but Sarah had isolated specific frequencies that repeated in regular intervals. When mapped in 4-dimensional spacetime, they formed complex geometric patterns that resembled nothing so much as— "It looks like code," Ulrich admitted, their color shifting to an intrigued purple. "But why would the builders of the spires encode information in light refraction patterns?" Sarah's fingers danced across the quantum interface, adjusting variables. "Because they wanted it to be universal. Mathematical patterns transcend species and cultures. Any civilization advanced enough to harness the spire's energy would eventually be able to see these patterns, if they knew where to look. Chief Scientist Kfax will never accept this," Lurix warned. He's invested his entire career in proving the spires are fundamentally unknowable. Sarah was about to respond when her computer chimed, indicating it had finished processing another set of observations. The new data made her breath catch in her throat. Lyrics, look at this. When we apply a quantum uncertainty filter to the light patterns, the holographic display transformed, showing how the light waves collapsed into distinct geometric shapes when observed from specific quantum states. It was like looking at a message written in four-dimensional space, using quantum mechanics as the ink. This isn't just code, Sarah whispered, her excitement building. It's instructions. The spires aren't trying to hide their secrets, they're trying to teach us how to understand them. Lurix's form flickered rapidly through various colors, a sign of intense emotion. But this contradicts everything we know about quantum observation. The uncertainty principle only applies if you're trying to observe something directly. Sarah interrupted. We're not trying to see inside the spires. We're learning to read what they're showing us on the outside. The next few days were a blur of activity as Sarah refined her theory. She developed what she called a quantum lens, not a physical device, but a mathematical framework for interpreting the spire's light patterns across multiple quantum states simultaneously. Word of her work spread through the Academy, drawing both curiosity and criticism. Most Centaurian scientists dismissed her ideas as primitive human wishful thinking, but a few, particularly younger researchers, began to take interest. Fax, however, was less than pleased. This is absurd, the chief scientist declared during a formal review session, his crystalline form pulsing with angry red frequencies. You're suggesting that everything we know about quantum mechanics is wrong. Sarah stood her ground before the review panel, her holographic presentation showing the increasingly clear patterns she'd discovered. Not wrong, chief scientist, incomplete. The builders of the spires understood quantum mechanics on a level we haven't reached yet. They found a way to encode information in the very fabric of reality. And you, a human scientist who has been here barely a month, somehow discovered what generations of Centaurian researchers missed. Fax's tone was scathing. Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective, Sarah replied calmly. Your civilization's understanding of quantum mechanics is far beyond Earth's, but you've developed certain assumptions about what's possible and what isn't. Humans, we tend to ignore those kinds of limitations. One of the senior researchers, Fatal, leaned forward. These patterns you've identified, you believe there's some kind of instruction manual? Sarah nodded, bringing up a new holographic display. Look at how the patterns progress. They start with basic mathematical concepts we already understand, then build toward more complex principles. It's like a textbook, teaching us the fundamental concepts we need before moving on to advanced applications. And what is the purpose of these supposed instructions? Fax demanded. Sarah's expression grew serious. I don't know yet, but the complexity and sophistication of this system suggests it's something important. Important enough that the builders wanted to ensure any civilization that found the spires would eventually be able to understand it. This is dangerous speculation, Fax declared. The spires provide our civilization with energy. They work perfectly as they are. There is no need to risk destabilizing them with these reckless experiments. With respect, chief scientist, Sarah countered. The spires were clearly built to do more than generate power. We have a responsibility to understand what they're trying to tell us. The review session ended with no formal decision, but Sarah could sense the shifting dynamics in the room. While K-Fax and his closest allies remained dismissive, others were beginning to consider the possibilities her theory presented. Later that evening, as Sarah worked late in her lab, Lurix arrived with unexpected news. Several members of the review panel have been discussing your findings privately. They said, their color shifting nervously. There's growing support for your theory, especially among the younger researchers. But K-Fax. Let me guess, Sarah said, looking up from her work. He's not taking it well. Lurix's form flickered anxiously. He's requesting an immediate halt to your research, citing potential risks to the spire's stability. But Dr. Chen, Before that happens, there's something you need to see. The young Centaurian projected a hologram showing new data from the Academy's quantum sensors. Sarah's eyes widened as she processed what she was seeing. The patterns, she breathed. They're changing. Getting stronger. Yes, Ulrichs confirmed. It's as if the spires know we're finally starting to understand them. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She was close to something big, something that could change everything. The only question was whether she'd have enough time to discover what it was before Cthax shut her down. Breaking the barrier. The emergency meeting of the Centaurian Science Academy's High Council was called at dawn. Sarah stood before the assembled scientists, her quantum lens prototype humming softly beside her. The device, cobbled together from modified Centaurian technology and her own innovative designs, represented humanity's greatest contribution to quantum physics since achieving faster-than-light travel. "This is more than reckless," Cthax declared, his crystalline form radiating angry pulses of red and orange. "It's potentially catastrophic. Dr. Chen's device could destabilize the entire spire network." Sarah activated the prototype, and the chamber filled with a soft, prismatic light. "The quantum lens doesn't interact with the spires at all," she explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It simply allows us to perceive the quantum states they're naturally projecting. Like learning to read a new language." Vitol, who had become one of her strongest supporters on the council, moved closer to examine the device. "The energy readings are minimal," they noted, "and the mathematical principles appear sound." "Theory and practice are very different things," Cthax countered. "If she's wrong, if there's even the slightest miscalculation." A low hum filled the chamber, cutting through their debate. Every head turned toward the windows, where the nearest spire had begun to pulse with an intense, rhythmic light. "That's impossible," one of the council members whispered. "The spires have never." Sarah's quantum lens responded, its display shifting to match the spire's frequencies. "They're responding," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The patterns, they're becoming clearer, more focused. It's like they're adjusting their output to match our ability to perceive it." The chamber erupted in chaos as Centaurian scientists rushed to their instruments, recording and analyzing the unprecedented event. Fax stood frozen, his form flickering between disbelief and fear. Ulrichs burst into the chamber, their young form practically vibrating with excitement. "Dr. Chen, the pattern recognition algorithms you developed, they're beginning to decode the signal." Sarah rushed to the main display terminal, her fingers flying over the quantum interface. The spire's messages, previously hidden in subtle quantum fluctuations, were now broadcasting with unmistakable clarity. "It's a warning," she breathed, as the first translations appeared on screen. "No, more than that. It's a countdown." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The spires hadn't been built just to provide power. They were a monitoring system, watching for something that was coming. 14 standard days, Sarah announced, her voice catching. "Whatever the spires were built to warn us about, it's happening in 14 days. Cthax moved to the display, his earlier hostility forgotten in the face of this revelation. "These readings, they're talking about stellar dynamics. Massive energy fluctuations in nearby space. The Centauri cluster," Vitol said suddenly. "The unusual readings we've been detecting in the star systems closest to us, could they be related?" Sarah's mind raced as she processed the incoming data. The spires weren't just power generators or passive monitors. They were part of an ancient warning system, placed by some long-vanished civilization to protect future species from a cosmic catastrophe. "We need to decode the rest of the message," she said urgently. "The spires aren't just warning us. They're trying to tell us how to prevent whatever's coming." But Cthax had recovered from his initial shock, and his practical nature reasserted itself. "This is precisely why we cannot risk interfering with the spires. If they are indeed some kind of defensive system, any disruption could be disastrous." "They're not just defensive," Sarah argued, pointing to new patterns emerging in the data. "Look at these sequences. They're instructions, specific quantum-level manipulations that we need to perform. The spires aren't just warning us. They're trying to help us save ourselves. The debate that followed was intense, with the council divided between those who wanted to act on the warning and those who feared any intervention would only make things worse. As they argued, Sarah continued working, her quantum lens revealing more of the spire's urgent message. What she found chilled her to her core. "The Centauri cluster is destabilizing," she announced, cutting through the debate. "One of the stars. It's entering a pre-supernova state. But it's happening too fast, too early in its life cycle. Something's wrong with space-time itself in that region." The implications were staggering. A supernova this close to Centauri Prime wouldn't just destroy the planet. It would trigger a chain reaction through the entire sector, potentially destabilizing dozens of star systems. "The builders of the spires," she continued, "they found a way to prevent this, to stabilize space-time itself. But we need to act now, while we still have time to implement their solution." Fax's form had gone almost completely transparent, a sign of extreme distress in Centaurians. "You're asking us to trust the fate of our civilization to instructions left by an unknown species, interpreted through human technology we barely understand." "No," Sarah replied firmly. "I'm asking you to trust in science, in evidence, in the clear message being broadcast by technology that's kept your world safe for thousands of years. The spires are trying to save us, but only if we're willing to listen." She took a deep breath, knowing her next words could determine the fate of countless lives. "The builders left us these instructions for a reason. They believed that eventually someone would come along who could understand them and put them to use. Maybe that's why our species met when we did. Human intuition and creativity, combined with Centaurian quantum technology, together, we might be exactly what they were waiting for." The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Outside, the spire's pulsing had grown stronger, its message more urgent. They had 14 days to save not just Centauri Prime, but potentially the entire sector. The question was, would ancient wisdom, alien technology, and human determination be enough to prevent catastrophe? Sarah looked at the quantum lens, still faithfully translating the spire's message, then at the faces of the Centaurian scientists around her. She saw fear there, yes, but also something else. Something that humans had long ago learned was essential for any great scientific breakthrough: hope. Race against time. The next 10 days passed in a blur of feverish activity. The Centaurian Science Academy had been transformed into a hub of round-the-clock research and development, with teams of scientists working in shifts to decode and implement the spire's instructions. Sarah Chen hadn't slept more than a few hours at a time, surviving on stimulants and the raw urgency of their mission. "The quantum harmonics are still out of alignment," she muttered, studying the holographic display where streams of data from all 7 spires converge. Dark circles had formed under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the controls. "We're missing something fundamental about how they synchronize." Lyrics, who had barely left her side throughout the crisis, shifted their crystalline form in a pattern that Sarah had learned to recognize as deep concern. "The stellar readings from the Centauri cluster are getting worse. The space-time distortions are accelerating." Sarah nodded grimly. They had already evacuated the systems closest to the unstable star, but a full evacuation of the sector would be impossible in the time they had left. Billions of lives hung in the balance. "Dr. Chen." Fax's voice came from behind them, his tone notably different from the dismissive attitude he'd shown in their early encounters. "The Council has reviewed your latest proposal. It's unprecedented." Sarah turned to face the chief scientist, noting how his usually pristine crystalline form showed signs of stress fractures, the Centaurian equivalent of human exhaustion. "The spires weren't built to work independently," she explained. "They're meant to function as a network, channeling and focusing quantum energies on a scale we've never attempted. But to do that, we need to synchronize them perfectly. And your solution is to link them through human consciousness." Kithex's form flickered with skepticism, but there was also a hint of desperate hope in his voice. "Not exactly," Sarah said, pulling up a new set of diagrams. "The builders left us a blueprint for what they called a quantum interface bridge. It's a device that can translate quantum states between different forms of consciousness, crystalline, organic, maybe others we haven't even encountered yet. The spires need that translation to achieve perfect synchronization. But the risks," Fax began, "are nothing compared to what will happen if we fail," Sarah finished. "The prototype is ready. We just need your approval to proceed." The quantum interface bridge sat in the center of the Academy's main laboratory, a hybrid of Centaurian technology and human innovation. It looked deceptively simple, a crystalline chamber sized for a human occupant, surrounded by quantum field generators and connected to monitoring stations manned by both human and Centaurian scientists. "The theory is sound," Vital reported, reviewing the final calculations. "When Dr. Chen enters the chamber, her consciousness will serve as a quantum focal point, allowing us to synchronize all 7 spires simultaneously. But we don't know what that level of quantum exposure will do to a human mind," Sarah finished. She had insisted on being the one to enter the chamber, despite objections from both her human colleagues and the Centaurian scientists. "We don't have time to find out. 4 days left, and the stellar readings are getting worse by the hour." The preparation process was meticulous. Sarah underwent a series of quantum attunement treatments designed to prepare her nervous system for the enormous load it would have to bear. Lyrics personally calibrated each system, their usual excitement replaced by solemn focus. "The spire's messages have changed," they reported as they worked. "They're no longer just broadcasting warnings. They're providing real-time guidance for the synchronization process. It's as if they're anticipating what we're attempting." Sarah managed a tight smile. "Maybe they are. We still don't know how deep their quantum awareness goes." Ready for final checks. The chamber hummed to life as Sarah took her position inside. The crystalline walls seemed to pulse with an inner light, responding to her presence. Through the transparent sections, she could see teams of scientists at their stations, making final adjustments and triple-checking readings. Dr. Chen, Kathax approached the chamber, his form shifting through complex patterns of color. I was wrong about humans. About you. What you've accomplished here. Save it for after we succeed," Sarah interrupted gently. "Besides, this isn't just human achievement. It's what happens when species work together. That's worth more than any personal vindication." The chief scientist nodded, his form settling into a steady blue glow that indicated respect and determination. "Beginning quantum field initialization in 3 minutes. May your consciousness remain coherent, Dr. Chen." As the countdown began, Sarah closed her eyes and steadied her breathing. The quantum lens she'd developed had shown them the way. But this was something far beyond mere observation. She was about to attempt direct quantum interface with technology built by an ancient civilization, channeling enough energy to affect space-time itself. The chamber's hum deepened, and Sarah felt the first tingles of quantum resonance dancing across her skin. Outside, the 7 spires of Centauri Prime began to pulse in unison, their light growing steadily brighter. "Quantum field stabilizing," someone called out. "Consciousness interface online in 5, 4, 3. Sarah's last coherent thought was a silent message to the builders of the spires, whoever they had been. "I hope we're worthy of the trust you placed in future generations." Then the quantum fields fully engaged, and her consciousness expanded into something vast and incomprehensible, where the boundaries between mind and matter, space and time, self and other began to blur. The fate of billions now rested on humanity's greatest strengths: the courage to venture into the unknown, and the ability to build bridges between worlds. Humanity's gift. The moment Sarah Chen's consciousness merged with the quantum interface bridge, the universe changed. Not metaphorically, but literally. Waves of quantum manipulation rippled outward from Centauri Prime's 7 spires. bending space-time itself to their will. Inside the crystalline chamber, Sarah experienced existence on a level no human had ever reached before. Her consciousness expanded through the quantum network, touching each spire in turn. Through them, she could sense the approaching catastrophe, the massive star preparing to tear itself apart. Its quantum structure destabilized by ancient forces the builders had long ago learned to control. Quantum coherence achieved. Lurix's voice seemed to come from both everywhere and nowhere. All 7 spires are synchronized. Sarah couldn't respond, not in words anyway. Her consciousness was spread across the quantum network, processing information at speeds that made computer systems look primitive. The builder's instructions flowed through her mind like a river of pure understanding, showing her exactly what needed to be done. Through the spires, she could feel the dying star's pain. The quantum distortions weren't natural. They were echoes of some ancient cataclysm, ripples in space-time that had taken millennia to reach this point. But the builders had known this would happen. They had prepared for it. Kiphax watched in awe as the quantum readings exceeded anything his civilization had ever recorded. The spires, they're channeling energy directly into subspace. They're creating some kind of quantum scaffold around the unstable star. The process was beautiful and terrifying. Sarah's expanded consciousness directed the spire's energy with impossible precision, weaving a net of quantum forces around the dying star. The builder's instructions guided her through each step, showing her how to stabilize the quantum fluctuations that threatened to tear the star apart. But the strain was immense. Inside the chamber, Sarah's physical form began to show signs of stress. Warning alarms blared as her vital signs fluctuated wildly. Her neural patterns are breaking down, one of the human scientists warned. We need to abort. No. Lurix's crystal form pulsed with determination. Look at the stellar readings. It's working. The quantum distortions are beginning to stabilize. Through her quantum-enhanced senses, Sarah could feel everything. The star's struggle against its own destruction, the delicate web of forces the spires were weaving, the billions of lives hanging in the balance. The builders had known that only a consciousness capable of intuitive leaps, of seeing patterns in chaos, could successfully channel the spire's power this way. That's why they had waited, not for a civilization with advanced technology, but for one with the right combination of scientific understanding and creative insight. They had waited for humanity. With this realization came the final piece of understanding. Sarah's consciousness reached out one last time, touching each spire in sequence. The quantum scaffold around the dying star pulsed once, twice, and then collapsed inward. For a moment, every instrument in the Centaurian Science Academy went dead. When they came back online, the readings made the scientists gasp. The star, Vital whispered in awe. It's healing itself. The quantum structure is reknitting, using the scaffold as a template. The quantum interface bridge powered down gradually, allowing Sarah's consciousness to return to normal spacetime. When the chamber finally opened, she collapsed into Lurix's waiting arms, her body trembling from the experience. Did it? She managed to whisper, her voice hoarse. Did it work? See for yourself, Kiphax said softly, directing her attention to the main display. The stellar readings were clear. Not only had they prevented the supernova, but the quantum scaffold had transformed the star's internal structure, stabilizing it for millions of years to come. The threat that the builders had prepared for had been averted. In the days that followed, as Sarah recovered her strength, the full implications of their achievement began to sink in. The spires had shared more than just the solution to an immediate crisis. They had provided insights into quantum mechanics that would transform both human and Centaurian science. 2 weeks after the crisis, Sarah stood before the Centaurian High Council again, but this time as an honored guest rather than a controversial outsider. The builders knew that quantum mechanics isn't just about particles and waves. She explained, her voice still slightly weak but growing stronger. It's about connections between matter and energy, space and time, and most importantly, between different forms of consciousness. They left us the spires not just as tools, but as teachers. And what would you have us learn from them, Dr. Chen? Fax asked, his tone now filled with genuine respect. Sarah smiled. That the greatest discoveries come when we reach across the boundaries that divide us. Human intuition, Centaurian quantum science, and the Builder's ancient wisdom. None of us could have solved this alone. But together, we achieved what was thought impossible. Lyrics finished, their form glowing with pride. The council chamber filled with the crystalline equivalent of applause, a harmonious resonance that made the air itself sing. But Sarah wasn't finished. The builders left similar spires on other worlds, she said, bringing up a star chart. They created a network spanning this entire sector of the galaxy. Each spire contains different knowledge, different pieces of their legacy. They wanted us to find each other, to work together, to grow beyond what any single species could achieve alone. Cathex's form shifted to a color Sarah had never seen before, a deep, rich purple that seemed to contain hints of every other shade. Then perhaps it is time for the Centaurian Science Academy to expand its membership. We have much to learn from humanity's unique perspective. Sarah looked out the window at the nearest spire, still pulsing with its quantum light. The builders had created something remarkable, not just a warning system or a power source, but a beacon meant to bring different species together, to forge connections across the vast distances of space and the even vaster gulfs of consciousness. They had waited patiently for thousands of years, knowing that eventually the right combination of species would find each other. A civilization with advanced quantum technology, and another with the creativity and courage to use it in ways no one had imagined before. The spires hadn't just saved Centauri Prime. They had given humanity and the Centaurians something far more valuable. A shared future, filled with endless possibilities. As Sarah watched the three suns set behind the crystalline towers, she smiled. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And somewhere out there, other spires were waiting, holding other secrets, other challenges that could only be solved together. The universe, she knew, would never look quite the same again.